The huge space station floated silently among the stars, its long corridors and glass-walled observation decks glowing with light. It was called Aurora Prime, a place where hundreds of alien species came to trade, learn, and explore. Among the crowds of visitors, a tiny alien girl named Lyra moved quietly, trying not to draw attention to herself. She was a Valurian, a small race known for their soft violet skin and gentle hums. Lyra was smaller than most of the children on the station, barely half the height of a human, and her three-fingered hands clutched a translucent notebook filled with drawings of stars, plants, and strange creatures from her home world. Lyra liked to observe quietly. She loved the way the sunlight glimmered through the station's glass walls, creating patterns on the metal floors. She hummed soft melodies from her home planet, which only a few could hear. But today she was not unnoticed. A group of older, burly alien students called the Krath had spotted her. They were known for their bullying and enjoyed teasing anyone who looked different. When Lyra tried to join the games in the playground area, the Krath surrounded her. "Pygmy Valurian," one of them shouted, pointing at her. "Sing your little song for us." The other Krath laughed, echoing his words, and the circle of children around them parted to watch. Lyra's violet skin seemed to darken as she hugged her notebook closer, hoping no one would notice her shaking. She tried to explain, I don't want to, but the Krath snatched her notebook, tossing it up and catching it like a toy. Pages bent and bent until one tore. Her voice broke and she stepped back, tears forming in her large round eyes. Nearby, a human boy named Avery noticed what was happening. Avery was 14, tall for his age, with a curiosity that often led him into trouble. He had been observing Lyra in class, fascinated by the melodies she hummed and the way she sketched the stars and plants of her home world. He had wanted to talk to her, but she was shy and always seemed to drift away from everyone else. Seeing her in danger now made his stomach clench. He felt a surge of determination he hadn't known he possessed. "Hey, leave her alone," Avery shouted, stepping into the circle of Krath and other children. The Krath stopped, surprised that a human would challenge them. "Who are you?" one demanded, his voice deep and rough. "This alien is ours to amuse." Avery's heart beat faster, but he didn't back down. "You don't get to treat her like that," he said firmly. The other children murmured, unsure if they should step back or step in. The tallest Krath lunged toward Avery, but he sidestepped, blocking the path between Lyra and the bullies. Lyra's tears flowed freely now. She had never experienced someone standing up for her like this. "It's okay," Avery said softly, reaching out a hand. "I've got you." Lyra looked up at him with wide eyes, unsure if she could trust anyone. But something in his steady gaze reassured her. Slowly, she nodded and allowed him to guide her away from the crowd. Once they were a safe distance away, Avery helped Lyra sit on a low bench near a small indoor garden. Strange plants from different planets glowed under soft lights. The scents were gentle, unlike the harsh smells of the playground and crowded corridors. Lyra hugged her notebook to her chest, still trembling. Avery crouched in front of her. "It's okay. They can't hurt you anymore," he said. Lyra sniffled. I tried to play with them, but they..." Her voice faltered and she looked down at her torn notebook. "They said I was too small, too weak, that I didn't belong." Avery glanced at the notebook. Some pages were bent, some ripped, but the drawings were still visible. He gently turned a page and smiled. "Look at this," he said. "You made all of this. It's amazing. You belong here just as much as anyone." Lyra blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said something like that to her. Most humans and aliens she had met either ignored her or laughed at her differences. Avery's words were strange but comforting. Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Avery shrugged, a small smile forming on his face. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I think everyone deserves a friend." For the first time since arriving at the station, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Avery stayed with her, and they began talking about her drawings and the melodies she hummed. She explained the symbols in her notebook, how each represented a star or a plant or an emotion from her home world. Avery listened carefully, asking questions and drawing simple notes to remember her words. He was fascinated not by the differences in her race, but by the creativity and depth in her work. Meanwhile, the Krath grumbled in the distance, realizing that their bullying had not intimidated Lyra. They had expected her to shrink further, cry silently, or run away forever. Instead, she had a human boy standing with her, protecting her. Their confidence faltered slightly. Some of the children who had laughed began to look away, unsure if they wanted to be part of the teasing anymore. Power did not always lie with the loudest voices. A few days later, Lyra cautiously ventured out again, this time with Avery walking beside her. They went to the observation decks and watched the stars streak past the station. Lyra told him stories of the Valurian world, of the oceans that shimmered in violet light, of forests that hummed softly in the wind. Avery shared stories of Earth, of oceans that stretched endlessly, mountains that scraped the sky, and forests where animals of every kind lived together. Even though their worlds were far apart, they found common ground in their curiosity and wonder. As Lyra grew more comfortable, she began to smile around other children too. Avery encouraged her to join small games, and gradually, other kids approached, intrigued by her sketches and melodies. Some of the younger children tried to mimic her humming, while others asked her to draw them a picture of a distant star. Lyra's confidence began to grow slowly but steadily. She realized that being small did not make her weak. It allowed her to see the world differently, to notice beauty that others often overlooked. The Krath, however, did not forget. They watched her from a distance, muttering and plotting. They wanted to embarrass her again, to prove that she was still an outsider. But Avery stayed close, alert to any sign of trouble. Lyra felt safer with him around, though she still remained cautious. She learned to rely on her own wits as well, finding clever ways to avoid the Krath or to respond without fear. Avery never asked her to fight. He only asked her to trust in herself and in their growing friendship. One afternoon, the Krath struck again. They waited until Lyra was alone near the festival grounds, then snatched her notebook and held it high above their heads. "Your little book belongs to us now," one shouted. Lyra's heart pounded. She felt smaller than ever. Her mouth opened to protest, but the words caught in her throat. Avery, who had been nearby, sprinted forward. "Stop, give it back," he yelled. The Krath laughed at him. "And what are you going to do, human? You can't do anything to us." Avery's chest tightened, but he didn't back down. "You're wrong," he said. "We're not alone." At that moment, children who had quietly watched the bullying began stepping forward. They formed a protective circle around Lyra, their faces determined. Humans, Valurians, and even a few small creatures from Artrin joined them. The Krath hesitated, realizing that their actions were no longer uncontested. Avery reached Lyra's side and gently grabbed her hand. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to be afraid. We're here with you." Lyra looked at him, then at the growing circle of children around her. For the first time, she felt true courage, not the kind that came from fighting, but the kind that came from having friends who stood by her side. Slowly, she lifted her notebook and held it close, ready to face the crowd. The Krath muttered angrily, but retreated, realizing that the unity of others outweighed their power. Avery and the children returned Lyra's notebook, careful not to tear any pages further. Lyra opened it, and a faint glow seemed to rise from her violet skin as she hummed a soft melody from her home world. The crowd quieted, listening to the tune. Avery smiled, encouraging her silently. The melody grew, joined by whispers and hums from the other children. Even those who had laughed before now listened, captivated. When the song ended, Lyra's eyes sparkled with tears of happiness. Avery patted her shoulder. "See, your song matters. And so do you." Lyra nodded, feeling stronger than she ever had. She had faced fear, faced bullying, and discovered that courage often came in quiet forms. Friendship, support, and belief in oneself were sometimes the greatest powers of all. As the sun-like lights of the station glimmered, Lyra and Avery walked toward the observation deck, their hands brushing occasionally. Lyra pointed to the distant stars, telling him about her home world. Avery listened eagerly, fascinated by the worlds beyond his own. The Krath were gone, at least for now, but Lyra had learned an important truth. Even in a universe vast and full of dangers, someone would stand up for you. And if you were brave enough to trust, others would stand with you too. The soft wind of the observation deck, the glowing plants, and the hum of the station created a feeling of calm. Lyra tucked her notebook safely under her arm and felt a small smile spread across her face. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She had Avery, she had friends, and most importantly, she had herself. The stars outside twinkled as if celebrating her courage, and Lyra hummed a quiet tune, knowing that tomorrow she would try again. And maybe, just maybe, too. The war between the United Human Colonies and the Tarkesh Dominion had left entire worlds scarred and abandoned. Cities that once glittered with technology now lay in ruins, and the air smelled of ash and chemicals. On the planet Varkas IV, the final battles had ended days ago, leaving only silence and smoke behind. Amid the rubble, human medic Evan Carter moved carefully, checking for survivors. His uniform was torn, his gloves worn, and his hands were covered in dirt and dried blood. But he kept moving because he knew that somewhere out there someone might still need him. Evan had seen enough death to last a lifetime. He had treated soldiers from his own side and the enemy alike. He had learned long ago that pain and suffering did not recognize borders or flags. That knowledge had kept him alive, and it had earned him a reputation among both humans and Tarkesh soldiers as someone who saved lives without judgment. But even he was not prepared for what he would find that evening. The wind howled across the barren landscape, lifting dust and scraps of metal. Evan's scanner beeped faintly, signaling a lifeform nearby. Following the signal, he discovered the wreckage of a small hovercraft. The metal hull was bent and smoking, sparks flying from broken wires. Inside, among twisted panels and shredded fabric, lay a young alien woman. She was badly injured, her uniform bearing the royal insignia of the Tarkesh Dominion. Her eyes fluttered open, sharp and wary, and she immediately tried to pull herself up. A sharp piece of metal clattered to the ground as she instinctively reached for it. Evan crouched slowly, showing no fear. "Stop, you'll hurt yourself more," he said calmly. His voice was steady, controlled, and strange in its gentleness. The princess froze, staring at him. Her blue skin glimmered faintly under the fading sun, her hair tangled with dust and debris, and her breathing was uneven. She was Princess Lysera, daughter of the tyrant king who had led the Tarkesh Dominion against countless human colonies. The thought of saving her made Evan hesitate for only a moment. She was the enemy, yes, but she was also dying. "I said stop," Evan repeated, moving closer but keeping his hands visible. Lysera's eyes narrowed, filled with suspicion and pride. No one had ever spoken to her this way, not even her father's generals. She was used to fear, obedience, and intimidation, not calm, quiet authority. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then, almost reluctantly, she lowered her hand. Evan reached out carefully and helped her sit up, examining her injuries. Her leg was crushed, and there were deep lacerations along her side. She winced sharply, but she didn't scream. "You'll need a splint for your leg," he said softly, setting down his medkit. Lysera's pride flared. "I don't need your help, human," she hissed. Evan only shook his head. "You will if you want to live." For the next few hours, Evan worked methodically. He cleaned her wounds with purified water, applied medical gel to prevent infection, and built a splint from the remnants of the hovercraft. Lysera watched him silently, her arms crossed, her pride preventing any sign of gratitude. At first she tried to insult him, calling him weak, slow, and unworthy. Evan did not respond. His focus never wavered. He spoke only when necessary, explaining each step in a way she could understand. Night fell and the wind grew colder. Evan built a small shelter from wreckage and debris, covering it with a tarp to protect them from the elements. He gave her some rations, enough to keep her alive, though not enough to feel like a feast. Lysera looked at the small portions suspiciously, as if expecting poison, but she ate anyway. The silence between them stretched long. She watched him move with precision and care, and slowly something began to change. She had never seen a human care for an enemy without expecting something in return. Over the next few days, Evan tended to her injuries with the same patience and professionalism. He never asked her about her title or her father. He did not lecture her on politics or war. He treated her as a patient, nothing more, nothing less. And that simple respect confused Lysera. She was used to people treating her as a weapon, a pawn, or a threat. No one had ever treated her as a person before. One morning she tried to stand, leaning heavily on the splint. She winced, and Evan caught her before she fell. "You need more time," he said gently. "I can't allow you to push yourself too soon." Lysera's eyes flashed with anger and pride. "I am not a child to be coddled," she snapped. But even as she spoke, she relied on his support, and a tiny flicker of respect began to form. Evan only smiled faintly. "You are stronger than you think," he said. Their routine was interrupted by distant noises, metal scraping against metal, the faint hum of engines. Tarkesh patrols were nearby. Evan's first thought was to hide, but Lysera's eyes widened in fear and she instinctively tried to move toward him. Without thinking, he positioned himself in front of her. "Stay behind me," he instructed. The patrols drew closer. Evan knew that if they were discovered, both of them would be captured or worse. He whispered instructions to Lysara, telling her to remain still, to breathe slowly, and to trust him. She obeyed, her pride battling with instinct. The patrols passed, scanning the area, but somehow they missed the small shelter. Evan exhaled slowly once they were gone. Lysara looked at him with a mix of awe and confusion. Why did you risk yourself?" she asked quietly. "Because it's the right thing to do," Evan replied simply. "Not because of who you are or who your father is. Because it's right." The words struck her in a way she could not explain. She had never heard anyone speak like that before. Her life had been filled with fear, obedience, and cruelty. And now she saw a human willing to protect her even though she was the enemy. Days turned into a week. Lysara's wounds began to heal and her strength slowly returned. She walked with Evan's help, learning to trust him in small ways. She began to ask questions, not about politics or war, but about humans, about medicine, and about Evan himself. He answered simply, never hiding anything, never exaggerating. His honesty was refreshing, and for the first time she felt a strange sense of safety. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and red, Lysara spoke softly. You are different from what I expected," she admitted. Evan looked at her, surprised but calm. "Different how?" he asked. "Not cruel, not weak, not afraid," she said. "Most humans are predictable. They hate us. They kill without hesitation, but you are not like that." Evan smiled faintly. "I do what I can. That's all any of us can do." For a moment, silence fell over them, broken only by the wind. Lysara felt something unfamiliar stir inside her. Gratitude, yes, but also curiosity and perhaps even respect. She had never allowed anyone to see her as a person before. Not her father, not her generals, not even her tutors. But this human, this medic, had done just that. Suddenly the ground shook. An explosion rocked the ruins. Dust and debris filled the air, and Evan grabbed Lysara, shielding her from falling metal. The patrols had returned, alerted by distant scouts. They were closing in fast, and there was no time to hide. Evan looked at Lysara, his expression calm but determined. "Hold on to me," he instructed. They ran through the ruins, dodging burning debris and crumbling walls. Lysara tried to fight, to push him away, but his grip was firm. For the first time in her life, she realized that she was relying on a human, not as a soldier, not as an enemy, but as someone who cared about her survival. They reached a small alcove just as the patrols arrived. Plasma weapons hummed and fired, scorching the walls around them. Evan covered Lysara, moving her behind a broken column. He returned fire, not to kill, but to distract, giving her a chance to move safely. She watched him in disbelief. This human, who had no formal combat training, was holding back trained Tarkesh soldiers. The firefight lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, Evan and Lysara were still alive, though exhausted. Lysara's pride had been stripped away completely. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you just run?" "Because you're not just a princess," he said. "You're a person, and people deserve a chance to live no matter who they are." For the first time, Lysara felt something she had never felt before. Trust. And perhaps somewhere deep inside, hope. That night, as they huddled together in the shelter, Lysara realized that her life had changed forever. The human medic had not only saved her body, but had also begun to heal something inside her that she had never known was broken. Her sense of humanity, and she did not yet know it. But her gratitude would soon take a form that would surprise both of them, and change the destiny of worlds.